Hey, I know it's been a while, and Season 6 is right around the corner, so I'm definitely going to be dropping a lot of informational stuff about Season 6 when it drops. And I do kind of want to explain where I've been, why I've been on a little bit of a hiatus. I wasn't able to get around to making one. And this is kind of going to tie into my first kind of wish. So feel free to kind of like skip ahead if you're not interested in a bunch of this kind of explanation, but I know a lot of people have been asking where I am. So basically, in real life, the thing outside of video games, my girlfriend and I have actually been slowly working towards getting a house. And obviously that is a pretty long and lengthy process. And we're just in the, early stages of it. So I still am quite busy. And then on top of that, my work has been kind of picking up a little bit. So oftentimes when I get back home from work, I just feel a little bit more exhausted. On top of that, there just happens to be a lot of other things in life going on, just, real life events that kind of have been happening. And another thing is I did open up coaching. So a lot of days I've been doing a lot of private coaching, as that seems to have been a pretty popular thing. That I was kind of surprised with how many people have been reaching out to do that. And a lot of my days end up just being booked with private coaching. So for that reason, it's been hard for me to even get around to playing the game. And unfortunately, it's going to kind of stay that way. I'm going to try and make as much time as I can to play some of the new season and get you guys some information, but I'm probably going to have to go back into a little bit of hibernation while I'm dealing with everything again. It's just a little bit hard to find the time to properly put into making good content, and I'm not really interested in just kind of throwing together a bunch of stuff just for the sake of making videos. I'd rather, put in some effort. That way I'm happy with the outcome, and realistically, this is still just a hobby. It does make me some money, but I don't feel obligated to do it, so I'm not going to put in effort to force myself to do something that I'm not really happy with. So that being said, I have noticed when I am coming back to the game, I kind of ran into a little bit of an issue. And this issue has been around for quite some time, but because I just don't play this game as much, my playtime on the finals has maybe dropped to about a fourth, maybe a fifth of what it used to be weekly. This has been kind of exaggerated a little bit, and that is hiding rank and name from ranked lobbies. Now, for a lot of people, you might be a little bit confused, but there are a lot of streamers and YouTubers, myself included, who do get recognized quite a bit, especially in the higher elo community with how much playtime that we do have and how small the community is. It can be pretty easy to recognize someone, and this leads to something known as griefing, which is essentially targeting another team, trying your best to essentially wipe them and make sure that they lose. And this is essentially a normal tactic that a lot of people do. It's just a part of the game, but it gets exaggerated when you might be the only Ruby team or the only team that seems to be recognizable, because then that game ends up just turning into a 3v9 versus the typical fights that are like 3v3s and the odd third parties. Instead, you're basically always fighting every team as everybody continuously tries to target you. You might run away to the other side of the map to try to avoid that fight just to have them continuously chase you anyways. And that's been a pretty big problem. Now, at first I thought it might have been just a bit of a cope, maybe I'm just making up this excuse. But I have experimented in the past where I would change my name. If you guys remember Happy Dog and Giant Duck. And the thing is, a lot of people just catch on really quickly to when I change my name, to the point where it just feels like there might be just a small period where I don't get recognized, where I can get a normal game in. But I realized that, well, if I'm not streaming and if I'm not making YouTube videos, I might have a better representation of if my name even really matters. And I just kind of want to show you guys some trends. So I had a couple bad games when I was coming back as Apo. And as you can see, these are kind of two trends I was able to track looking at the players that I played with at the time. And these are some of the best players in the game. And I'm not going to sit here and name any names because I don't want anybody accusing anybody of anything. But this just happened to be one of the interesting cases where I was like, wow, like this is brutal, but these games just feel so weird. It just feels like we're fighting everybody. Am I just crazy? Has it been a little bit too long? And then I tried changing my name and actually playing with a different group of people. I also tried playing with people that I'm not even that familiar with, some people who might be a little bit worse. And I noticed it was easy. It honestly felt like I went from full Ruby lobbies to like bronze lobbies, even though the ranks were the exact same in every game. Since people didn't recognize me, I didn't get griefed. I had plenty of games where I got to just sit on the cash out and nobody fought us. Most of the fights were just 3v3s. I rarely had to fight for my life against the entire lobby. The amount of griefing that happened was near minimal when I changed my name, and it was just kind of a night and day difference. And after changing my name, reaching a safe rank into Rupee was such a breeze. Before, I felt like, you know, some days with these downward trends was really, really difficult, and I really had to grind myself out of it sometimes. But then I could just slap on the weirdest off-meta build, and it was just a complete breeze when people didn't recognize who I was. So clearly this is a problem for a small majority of people, and being able to hide your rank in your name, you know, a streamer mode, something like that, is definitely more catered to some of the bigger streamers and bigger names out there, even people who've been around for a long time and might not make content but are very recognizable. If a lot of your games are starting to feel really weird and you're continuously getting targeted, well, this is something that I think could help a lot of players out. Just being able to just, you know, play the game without having to fight for your life when you're 3v9ing the entire game. Instead, you get to have a normal game experience, and everybody else does too. And I think that is a big reason why I think it's really important, because not only does it help some of the more well-known players get to experience the game a little bit normally, and especially for the content creators, being able to show a representation of the game that's more accurate to how it is meant to be played. But for the people that are in that game, there's going to be a lot of times where the opposite effect happens, where people recognize players and instead they decide to go completely to the other side of the map and avoid that team out of fear, thinking, oh, this team is going to be far too difficult to deal with. Let's just go to the other cash out, which ends up meaning that every single cash out that the high ranked team has no contestants against them. It's a super easy walk by. They end up getting like no kills, but still winning. Whereas the other three teams have to fight everybody. And that can feel unfair and unrealistic of how the game is meant to be played. So being able to hide ranks from everybody until the end of the game where you get to see the rank, I think would be a lot healthier for the game, and I think would flow a lot better. I think this genuinely benefits everybody involved, because the way that the game will be played will be a lot more accurate to how it is meant to be played, which I think is a big issue. Griefing in general is a very big issue in the game, and nobody likes to be in second place or about to win just to have every single team out there target you and able to grief you out. This could even be in the natural form of a team just having slightly more cash, doubling up the last cash out, and then purposely trying to kill just you in order to let one of the other teams take that doubled up cash out. This is a very, very common thing that happens, and it's almost unavoidable. I think having a comeback mechanic is really important, but I think the way that it's currently done just isn't the best for the game. And I think hiding ranks and names is a good first step in order to helping alleviate that, because I've experienced it firsthand. If people don't recognize who I am, the game becomes so much easier. Now that we're past the yap phase of kind of explaining where I've been and why it's been a little bit hard for me to stream and make content at this moment, we can get into some of the other ones. So the first one is accessibility. I think accessibility is really, really important. Having features like being able to toggle on turning a burst weapon into essentially you just hold down left click and it will keep bursting when it's ready. So almost like a delayed automatic burst, whatever you want to call it, can be a nice form of accessibility. Same with semi-auto weapons, being able to kind of turn them into auto weapons if it's the same fire rate as the single fire. I think this could be a really good step, especially for the older crowd and people with carpal tunnel, because it does become a lot of a strain on your wrists. It can become a strain on your hand. There's also things like people who are on console wanting to use mouse and keyboard, making sure that that is an option where people can use mouse and keyboard without getting the aim assist and all the benefits, as long as it doesn't step into the form of cheating. But obviously we can use controller on PC. It would be nice for console players to have that same accessibility. And there's plenty other options within accessibility, whether it be more colorblind options or better colorblind options, even down to more audio options. There's plenty of different things that I think this game could add, which would only be beneficial to expanding our population. Next would be spectating. I think it'd be really good to spectate a player's game. So say, for example, if I am watching a friend play ranked, I'd have to have them stream in Discord or even streaming on Twitch, and then I'd have to go and tune in and watch that. I think it'd be a lot better to have that in-game. So if they're on my friends list, I can just say spectate game, and then I go to instantly jump in and start watching them the same way that we get to spectate in custom games. I think this would be really, really nice, especially for me, since I do a lot of like live coaching. being able to just sit there and watch the player in the game itself rather than having to force them to stream could simplify a lot of things for me. And it would also be nice to say, oh, I'm waiting on my friend. He's currently in World Tour. Let me just hop into the spectator and watch the rest of his game while I wait. Custom lobbies need to have a lot more features, especially if we want to foster a more competitive tournament-based community, along with making sure that our casuals are also happy. I think a lot of custom lobbies with really customized features could be fantastic for the casual community. I remember back in like season 1 and 2, I think it was, I used to host zombie game mode where I basically turned Bankit into a zombie game mode. And it was really, really fun, but it did become a little bit complicated because there was a lot of rules. So people who wanted to join basically had to come into the Discord and read all these rules. For the most part, it was pretty smooth, but having the tools in custom lobbies to be able to, ban specific stuff, set a timer, even an objective, whatever it may be, would be really, really nice. And then again, being able to have specific rules for the competitive scene or the custom matches would be great. Especially the tournaments have been really entertaining to watch. So more custom lobby features is only going to help everybody. And on that note, more competitive support. I know we have this big tournament coming up, so I don't really want to jump the gun here and say that they're not doing it because I really need to see what they're doing with Season 6 and the future of the finals when it comes to the competitive scene and the tournament they intend to host. But we obviously need a lot more support in terms of spectating tools and custom match options before we kind of jump the gun and start doing big tournaments. I also like to see more polishing and fixing up of current maps. I see that they are doing a little bit of a redesign, potentially even rework of the Las Vegas map that we saw in the teaser. But there's plenty of maps like Kyoto, even Bernal, that do have a lot of issues, especially when it comes to the flow of gameplay. And when you're looking at ranked competitive scenes where it's 3v3s, a lot of the spawn systems there can be pretty bad. So I think reworking these maps so that they can flow a little bit better, even traversal and stuff like Kyoto can be kind of a nightmare. So just reworking these maps instead of just ignoring them and then, jump into the next season, we keep adding new maps. It'd be really nice to see them rework and spend a little bit of time fixing them up. The new Ice Kyoto, I think, is actually a good step forward. I would just like to see more improvements there. Next, we're going to talk about balancing a little bit, and I know it is a little bit of a dead horse to continuously beat over and over again, basically saying, oh, we need to fix this, better balancing, blah, 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 blah. But I do want to see a meta that shines a little bit more around the automatic weapons. Basically, since the beginning of this game, there's been 2 automatics that I think really stand out as a quote-unquote meta pick, and that was earlier, the XP was pretty solid, often argued against whether the LH or the XP is better. And then we had the F car, which reigned supreme for quite some time until that was stomped out. And ever since some of those automatic weapons have sort of drifted away from the meta, we've been seeing a semi-auto and shotgun meta. The SA-12 on heavy has been meta since day one, and it still is meta. We have medium having the model being meta for quite some time until now, where we're seeing a mix of Cerberus and Pike. The Pike kind of has been on an up and down trend, and light currently, the LH1 is just the best pick on the class. So at least from what I've seen for quite some time now, the DMRs or semi-auto weapons and the shotguns seem to be the best picks on most classes. Even the M26 has been pretty strong in the meta up until that weird fix where the melees stop some of the cycle animations of the SA-12, the model, and the M26 all kind of got hit a little bit weirdly there, but the SA-12 still seems to reign supreme. But I would like to see stuff like the F-car, the AK, the XP, the Lewis, even the Shack a little bit more. A lot of these automatic weapons feel like they are the baseline for what you would expect from a meta pick in a game. If you look at most games in general, those tend to be the meta picks, something that is an automatic weapon. And I think a lot of new players coming find that, they're picking this up and it can be a little bit of a struggle to get into the game until they start to adapt and learn some of the more niche picks. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that you can't succeed with some of these weapons. We've obviously seen tons of top lights like myself use the XP. We see the F-car picked quite a bit, and the odd player also uses Shack like myself. But if you were to ask almost any of these competitive players, what the best pick on most of the classes is, you're probably going to hear that it's a DMR or a shotgun. Now we'll have to see when Season 6 comes around if any of the changes to gadgets, specializations, weapons, or whatever end up having a bit of a impact on the meta. We won't know till we're there, but specifically in the competitive scene, it does seem like the automatic weapons just sort of take a back seat. And a lot of people who use it simply use it because they want to, rather than it being the best pick. And to reiterate, this is kind of more for a very small percentage of the player base. I would say for the overwhelming majority of players, you probably don't really use shotguns or DMRs because, like I said, they're not really a pick that a lot of people gravitate towards. They're not a popular pick, but they do tend to be the best picks. The next request I have is improved practice range. The practice range as it stands right now, a lot of people like to sit as far back as they can and try and practice their sprays. There's not enough of a moving target practice in order to practice flicks. I think being able to turn the practice range a little bit more into like an aim trainer could be a really good step for a lot of people. Rather than having to open up something like Kovacs or aim labs, they could just open up the finals, hop into the practice range, and get a good warm-up and training before hopping into the game. But the bots, as they stand right now, are just not quite it. It would be nice if they expanded on it a little bit more so that we could practice, along with making it even easier to kind of change up your loadout and gadgets. Maybe even lowering the cooldowns or removing them so that we can practice some of the gadgets and mess around with some tech. Next is the confusing part of this game, which is callouts and map knowledge. Now, a lot of the competitive scene has already developed a lot of common terminology, such as like flat top, slanted roof, crane, church, mall, data center. There's plenty of different callouts that you're probably going to hear from a lot of competitive players, but until you actually hear it from them or make up your own, callouts are going to be very, very confusing. And I think it'd be really nice if you were on a specific part of the map, if it just told you, maybe at the top where the compass is, it just has a little name there that says, you know, construction or apartments or whatever the developers want. This would be a really good starting point for allowing better communication between teammates, because very often when I see new players or even coaching new players, it seems like, oh, I don't know what to call that. Like, I don't know how to communicate to them. And I feel like that is something that we could definitely improve on. Just something just as simple as giving us official map labels and callouts. And one thing I'm pretty passionate about is the spawn logic for both objective and players. Now, a big issue that I have is the way that the vaults and the cash out spawn. There's very often times where both cash outs spawn right together on the other side of the map from where both vaults are spawning, or the cash out spawns right next to a vault. There doesn't seem to be a proper flow to it. It feels very random. And there's plenty of times where this will actually screw you over. You might have a pretty good lead early on, but then the spawns push you so far from where you need to go that you're just not able to make it there in time. And you're unable to get that plug, which means that you kind of lose some of that tempo. So it'd be really nice for them to kind of work on these spawns, maybe even allow people to see where they're going to be ahead of time, but just giving us better spawn logic for the objectives and even for where you spawn could be really, really nice. And the final one, which I think everyone can agree on, just, you know, more improvements to the servers and the net codes are always nice. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with them. They've done a pretty good job fixing them from time to time. And there's definitely some hiccups and some days where the server might feel worse than others. So the continuous work and improvement towards those is obviously going to be a good thing for them to work on. And I will never not be asking for this. Even if they feel perfect, I feel like it's always nice to continuously strive for better. Now, this one might have been a little bit long-winded. Thank you for sticking around for the entire video. If you have, I intend to stream the event when I am allowed to, which I think is on the 19th or something for the preview event. So I hope to see you guys there. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't already. Comment below what you are most excited for Season 6, and if you have any wishes going further into the seasons. What do you want to see from Embark? I look forward to seeing what they've cooked up this season. I genuinely feel like this could be one of the best seasons based on what the developers have kind of talked about so far. We'll be able to get our hands on it soon enough, and I will see you in the finals.
Shit. No one jump.
Act like you're saying.
Wow.